Yamunatiravanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we'll discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 20. Mandavya Shapat Bhagavan Mandavya Shapat Bhagavan Rajasamyamano Yamaha Rajasamyamano Yamaha Bhratru Kshetre Bhujishyayam Bhratru Kshetre Bhujishyayam Jataha Satyavati Sutat Jataha Satyavati Sutat Mandavya Shapat Bhagavan Prajasamyam Mano Yamaha Bhratru Kshetre Bhujishyayam Jata Satyavati Sutat Mandavya Shapat Bhagavan Prajasamyam Mano Yamaha Bhratru Kshetre Bhujishyayam Jata Satyavati Sutat. Others, please. Mandavya Shapat Bhagavan Prajasamyam Mano Yamaha
Ratu Kshetre Bujishayam
Ratu Kshetre Bujishayam
Jata Satyavati Sutat
Yata Satyavati Sutat
Mandavaya Sadat Bhagavan
Mandaya Samhad Bhagavan
Raja Samya Manoyamaha
Rajasamya Mano Yamaha
Ratu Sete Pajusyayam
Ratu Kshetre Bujishayam
Jetta Satya Pate Sita
Jataha Satyavati Satyavati Sutta
Synonyms. Mandavya,
Mandaya,
the great Rishi Mandavya Muni.
the great saint Mandaya Muni,
Shapat,
Shapat,
by his curse.
by his
for
curse.
his curse,
Bhagavan,
Bhagavan,
the greatly powerful.
the greatly powerful,
Praja,
Raja,
one who is born.
one who is born,
Samyamana,
Samyamana,
controller of death.
controller of death,
Yama,
Yamaha,
known as Yamaraj.
known as Yamaraj,
Bhratu,
Ratu,
of the brother.
of the brother,
Kshetre,
Kshetre,
in the wife.
In the wife.
Interesting. It's an interesting usage. What does kshetra mean? Pardon?
like Kshetra again, like field,
Field.
body.
Field. So here the wife is the field in which the seed is sown. Interesting. Bhujishayam,
Bujishayam,
kept.
kept,
Jata,
Jata,
born.
born,
Satyavati,
Satyavati,
the mother of both Vichitravirya and Vyasadeva.
the mother of both Kshetra and Vyasadeva,
Sutat,
Sutat,
by the son,
by the son,
Vyasadeva.
Vyasadeva,
Translation. I know that you are now Vidura due to the cursing of Mandavya Muni, and that formerly you were King Yamaraj, the great controller of living entities after their death. You were begotten by the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, in the kept wife of his brother. Responsively, please. I know that you are now Vidura
I know that you are now Vidura,
due to the cursing of Mandavya Muni,
due to the cursing of Mandavya Muni,
and that formerly you were King Yamaraj,
and that formerly you were King Yamaraj,
the great controller of the living entities
the great controller of the living entities,
after their death.
after their death.
You were begotten by the son of Satyavati,
you were begotten by the son of Satyavati,
Vyasadeva,
Vyasadeva,
in the kept wife of his brother.
being the kept wife of his brother.
Mandavya Muni was a great sage, and Vidura was formerly the controller, Yamaraj, who takes charge of the living entities after death. Birth, maintenance, and death are three conditional states of the living entities who are within the material world. And as the appointed controller after death, Yamaraj once tried Mandavya Muni for his childhood profligacy and ordered him to be pierced with a lance. Mandavya, being angry at Yamaraj for awarding him undue punishment, cursed him to become a Shudra, a member of the less intelligent laborer class. Thus Yamaraj took birth in the womb of the kept wife of Vichitravirya from the semen of Vichitravirya's brother Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is the son of Satyavati by the great king Shantanu, the father of Bhishmadev. This mysterious history of Vidura was known to Maitreya Muni because he happened to be a contemporary friend of Vyasadev's. In spite of Vidura's birth from the womb of a kept wife, because he had otherwise high parentage and great connection, he inherited the highest talent of becoming a great devotee of the Lord. To take birth in such a great family is understood to be an advantage for attaining devotional life. Vidura was given this chance due to his previous greatness. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Kripatamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindho Yevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Mandavishapa Bhagavan Praja Samyamano Yamaha Bhratu Chetre Bhujishyayam Jata Satyavati Sutta. I know that you are now Vidura due to the cursing of Mandavi Muni, and that formerly you were King Yamaraj, the great controller of the living entities after their death. You were begotten by the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, and the kept wife of his brother. So, we've heard repeatedly recently how Vidura was referred by Uddhava to Maitreya Muni because Uddhava felt it was inappropriate for him to give instruction to someone who was his elder, such as Vidura. So I'm getting all the names mixed up here for a moment. Uddhava was more or less a contemporary of Krishna's, and Vidura is from the generation before him. So he's elder. So Vidura had approached him to hear some Harikatha. He remembered Lord Krishna, but when it came time for further discussion, it might lead to some instruction. Thinking that he did not want to be guilty of Maryada Vyatikrama, or overstepping the bounds of propriety, Uddhava desisted from giving Vidura any instruction and referred him instead to Maitreya Muni, who was from the previous generation to him. He was a contemporary of Vyasadeva and Bhishma and Vichitravirya. So here we are. And Maitreya has just congratulated Vidura on his questions. Oh, wait. Maitreya has congratulated Vidura on the nature of his questions and thanked him. He expressed his gratitude for having been engaged in sharing Harikatha by Vidura's questions. And we talked the other day about how grateful devotees feel for being given the opportunity to serve by immersing themselves in some Hanikata. So now Maitreya is acknowledging Vidura's exalted status, his own personal status. You know, he's saying, well, I mean, you've come to me in a sort of subordinate position, but I know who you really are, because I was there. You know, I know the deal. So you look like Vidura, you look like you know, someone of a mixed birth, having been born of a Shudrani, but I know that you're really Yamaraj. So here he's alluding to this backstory. Everybody's got a story. You know, and I look like some kid from Lompoc, California. But there was something that went on before that. For some reason that, you know, this wandering jiva got born in this, you know, pioneer family in Lompoc, California. And we don't know that story. I don't know that story, much less you. You don't know. I mean, you guys hardly know anything about my current life, nor I yours. But there's also a whole backstory, and you know, we don't know what it is. So here, Maitreya is alluding to Vidura's backstory, which is quite illustrious and very dramatic. As I mentioned the other day, in the Mahabharata, you've got everything. You got drama, not just drama, you got melodrama. It's soap opera level stuff. I mean, if you go back to Chopra's 1980s production of the Mahabharata, it's like every fifth scene, someone who's breaking down weeping. And every 12th scene, you've got Grandfather Bhishma with those eyebrows, sighing. Life, you know, life in this world is just such a drag. Everybody gets everything wrong, and I've got to live like practically forever. I have to witness and all this stuff, and then, you know, maybe once every episode or something, you got to have one of those song and dance set pieces that goes on for 12 minutes or something. In the middle of a battle? Maybe. It's Bollywood, after all. So here, you know, so here's that backstory. And Srila Prabhupada refers us in a parenthetic note to the first verse of chapter 13 in the 10th canto. So that verse is, Sri Sutta Goswami said, speaking of backstories, here we've got, this is the first level of the nested narratives of the Bhagavatam, right? Sutta Goswami speaking to, who am I going to pick on today? Oh, Lalit.
Maitreya.
He's probably there. Everybody's there after all, so we'll get to that. Ding, 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 ding. And a whole bunch of other sages, right? Gathered. Oh, we got somebody who didn't even wait to reach for her buzzer. She to see the devotees' enthusiasm for Krishna Katha. So, while traveling on a pilgrimage, Vidura received knowledge of the destination of the self from the great sage Maitreya. So this is being referred to, we're looking forward here, right? We're getting a little preview of coming attractions in the first canto, and then returned to Hastinapura. He became as well versed in this subject as he desired. So Srila Prabhupada's purport just gives us some of the backstory of Vidura. So he says, Vidura, one of the prominent figures in the history of the Mahabharata, he was conceived by Vyasadeva in the womb of the maidservant of Ambika, the mother of Maharaj Pandu. He is an incarnation of Yamaraj, being cursed by Manduka Muni, Mandavi Muni, same person, right? We even heard it both ways in yesterday's purport, I believe. I think in one paragraph in the purport, he was referred to as Mandavya and the other Manduka.
Yes, he was. It was very...
And so here, in today's verse, we saw Mandavya, and here he's referred to as Manduka. Being cursed by Manduka Muni, he was to become a Shudra. The story is narrated as follows. Once upon a time, the state police caught some thieves. Does that conjure up a picture of guys with gray cars and Smokey the Bear hats or something?
It does.
At least that's what the Virginia State Police looked like when I was a kid. The state police caught some thieves who had concealed themselves in the hermitage of Manduka Muni. The police constables, as usual, arrested all the thieves and Manduka Muni along with them. So they had pulled off this heist, or whatever, burglary, whatever the thing was, and then they went and took shelter in a hermitage because they figured, oh, shelter, ashram, means it's safe, right? But apparently there is no sanctuary conferred on dacoits by their having taken shelter of some Muni's ashram. The magistrate, so he arrested Manduka Muni along with them. The magistrate specifically punished the Muni to death by being pierced by a lance. When he was just to be pierced, the news reached to the king, and he at once stopped the act on consideration of his being a great Muni. So apparently he was arrested as a party to the theft. It must have been some theft, because they didn't just get their hand cut off. He wasn't even one of the thieves. He was just giving them shelter, right? And he was going to be pierced by a lance. So these things are going on. The king personally begged the Muni's pardon for the mistake of his men, and the saint at once went to Yamaraj, who prescribes the destiny of the living beings. So he's this great sage, and you expect maybe some mercy, and he's really ready with that mercy, right? Justice. I want justice, and I want it now. And so he appealed to a higher court. He went to the Supreme Court, right? So he at once went to Yamaraj, who prescribes the destiny of the living beings. Yamaraj, being questioned by the Muni, replied that the Muni in his childhood had pierced an ant. Okay, you want to talk about justice? Let's play that out a little bit more, right? Replied that the Muni in his childhood pierced an ant with a sharpened straw. That's the profligacy that Srila Prabhupada refers to in today's purport, right? The Muni's childhood profligacy. And for that reason, he was put into difficulty. The Muni thought it unwise on the part of Yamaraj that he was punished for his childish innocence. Until what age, Kusha?
15.
You get a bye until you're 15. You know, your parents are supposed to be hauled off to the Huskow until you're 15. Or I guess they would pay the fine or whatever it is. The Muni thought it unwise on the part of Yamaraj that he was punished for his childish innocence, and thus the Muni cursed Yamaraj to become a Shudra. And this Shudra incarnation of Yamaraj is known as Vidura, the Shudra brother of Dhritarashtra and Maharaj Pandu. But this Shudra son of the Kuru dynasty was equally treated by Bhishma Deva along with his other nephews, and in due course Vidura was married with a girl who was also born in the womb of a Shudrani by a Brahmana. Although Vidura did not inherit the property of his father, the brother of Bhishmadev, still confirmed. Still, he was given sufficient state property by Dhritarashtra, the elder brother of Vidura. Vidura was very much attached to his elder brother, and all along he tried to guide him on the right path. During the fratricidal war of Kurukshetra, Vidura repeatedly implored his elder brother to do justice to the sons of Pandu. But Duryodhana, we remember hearing this a couple months ago, right? Duryodhana didn't like that so much. So how did he respond?
Insulting.
He insulted him. He insulted his uncle, not just his uncle, the prime minister, like what would we call it now, the king's chief of staff. He insulted him so grievously that Vidura took that as a great excuse to just get out of that condemned place. He said, okay, that's it. That's as good a reason as I need to just get out of here. But Duryodhana did not like such interference by his uncle, and thus he practically insulted Vidura. Practically not in the sense of almost, but in the sense of in very practical terms. Called him all sorts of nasty things. This resulted in Vidura's leaving home for pilgrimage and taking instructions from Maitreya. So that brings us right here, right where we are today. So this whole backstory, this is, this is a big part of the Mahabharata. Of course, the climax, the main feature of the Mahabharata is the Battle of Kurukshetra. So we've got melodrama, we've got romance, right? Because here we've got King Shantanu, completely smitten by this fisherman's daughter. So he goes to the fisherman, and he was kind of like the chief of the fishermen. So there's a little equality there, right? You've got one Kshatriya to another sort of Kshatriya. And so he begged him for his daughter's hand in marriage, and he says, well, here's the deal. I'm the chief of these fishermen. I'm the king. My grandson should be king. So my daughter needs to marry someone whose son would be able to inherit the throne. But you already got a wife, you already got kids. Get Vichitra, no, not going to happen. So Shantanu went home and moped. Satyavati was also pining for Shantanu. And so one of those sons, Devavrata, actually went to the fisherman and pleaded on his father's behalf. This union should happen. And he said, no, you don't get it. I've made my conditions clear. My grandson needs to be the heir to the throne. And he can't be that in this case because you're the heir to the throne. Well, no, I'm not the heir to the throne. My brother Vichitravir is the heir to the throne. Oh, well, that's not good. So what can you do about that? He said, actually, Vichitravir Vichitravir was going to die. So eventually Vichitravir, so he makes a deal. He says, here's the thing, no, he was the elder son, right?
Vichitravir was Satyavati's, one of her two sons.
Right. And so Devavrata was the elder son. And he said, okay, I will take a vow that, now I can't remember the order again. Anyway, I will take a vow that I'll never have any connection with a woman. And this is a Kshatriya prince. This is such a heavy vow for a Kshatriya to take, it's impossible. Shook the heavens and shook out a whole bunch of flowers. Rained flowers, and you could hear the demigods exclaiming, Bhishma, Bhishma. So Devavrata thereafter became known as Bhishma. And so then, anyway, Vichitravirya died after 7 years on the throne without any children. So now we got a big problem. We got a kingdom and we got no heir, and no possibility of an heir, because the brother, Satyavati said, look, Bhishma, you got to fill in here. This is part of the code. So you got to stand in. And he says, I can't do that. I've taken this vow. She says, this is more important. He says, no, nothing's more important than dharma, than following your dharma. So Vyasadeva was called to take the place. Now Vyasadeva, I think I mentioned the other day, Prabhupada called him in one purport, referred to him as a hoary sage. This is a guy who lived in the forest, didn't take care of himself. His hair was all matted, his body was hairy and encrusted, his complexion was dark, his teeth weren't cared for very well, and I mean, he was not Brad Pitt. Not George Clooney, not by any stretch of the imagination. But still, he was called for this duty, and so he showed up to the first wife, Ambika, and when she saw him, she was so freaked out that she just, as soon as he touched her clothes, she just like, her eyes just like went shut. And she just couldn't bear to see what was going on. And so Vyasadeva said, okay, well, that's cool. At least she lived up to her obligation, kind of. But here's the thing, the son's going to be born really qualified, except he's going to have the strength of like 10,000 elephants. But he's going to be blind. So he's not even going to be able to be the proper heir to the throne. He said, okay, well, that means you've got to try again. All right. So then he approaches Ambalika, the other wife. There were 3 sisters. Amba, she's got this interesting story.
Yeah.
We've got transgender stuff going on in the Mahabharata.
That is wild stuff.
So she's off engaged in really severe austerities so she can kill Bhishma. Because she's really peeved. So, but that's another story.
How peeved was she?
Murderously.
It's pretty drastic, but it's a story for another day because I'm already out of time. So he comes back, and Ambalika sees him, and she's so freaked out, she just loses all her color. And he says, oh, that's cool. So her son will be born pale, like her. And they said, yeah, but that means he's not going to be very strong, so try again. So he came back again to Ambika, and Ambika said, not having it. So she took her maidservant, Prabhupada uses the phrase kept wife. So this is the way the culture was then, that the maidservants of the wife were also available to the husband. And so she took one of her maidservants and dressed her in her cloth and put her ornaments and everything on her and decorated her face as she would herself. And Bhishma came and gave her a son, and that was Vidura. Now, here's the thing. Vidura is technically a Shudra, but he's really at least as qualified as they are, because the Shudrani, when she saw Vyasadeva, she wasn't freaked out by his appearance. She was so respectful. She received him by standing up and bowing down. Whatever he wanted, she was there. So because of her faithfulness, she had a son who may not be able to inherit the property or the father's property or the father's title or responsibility, but he had everything anyway because Dhritarashtra was very affectionate to him. I mean, his little brother, And he's a good guy. How do you not like him? So he gave him everything he needed, as much money and whatever facility he needed, and he made him his chief advisor. So so this is really a big deal. So Vidura didn't leave home because he felt bad. He just saw it as, oh, cool. He felt bad for Duryodhana, actually. He felt sorry for Duryodhana because the guy was so miserable. When you see people like this, Dushasana and Duryodhana, who are so abusive of other people, and everything's about me, me. These are not happy people. They may have a lot of money. They may have some position. They may get themselves in the headlines all the time. They may have a lot of Twitter followers or whatever. They're not happy people. So Vidura felt sorry for Duryodhana like this because he was so unhappy. But he also knew that the whole palace was so rife, so rotten with intrigue, that it was just a miserable place to be. He gave Dhritarashtra his best advice, but then Dhritarashtra would always have Shakuni and Duryodhana and Dushasana in his other ear. And he just said, this is not a tenable situation and it's not going to end well. So when Duryodhana started insulting his uncle, I mean, come on, this is a culture in which you don't do that. But he's also the chief minister, the prime minister, the chief of staff, like practically the head of state. He's the sort of kind of filling in head of state's right hand. I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. But Vidura didn't, instead of taking it personally, he just felt sorry for everybody else because he had an excuse to get out of there. And he said, okay, now I'm going to go on pilgrimage and I'm going to spend the rest of my life hearing Krishna Katha from great sages. So first he approaches Uddhava, and then Uddhava refers him to Maitreya Muni, who is a generation his senior. And now we're going to hear some more. I'll stop there. Any quick questions or comments? Filling in blanks, correcting.
So you were saying Vidura, he was insulting the minister, or was the minister insulting him why he had to take the pilgrimage?
Duryodhana, his nephew.
He insulted the minister.
He insulted his uncle, Vidura. Who was
So he felt
chief.
because he insulted his uncle, he should do this, or he felt that maybe the time was right for him to get out of there because he knew there could be
Who's
some
he?
repercussions. The man who was insulted the minister. Maybe the minister would come back and say, hey, this guy's going to be arrested,
No, Vidura is a very saintly person.
But he insulted.
No, he was insulted.
Oh, he was insulted. Vidura was.
His nephew, Duryodhana, insulted him.
Okay, but not the minister.
The minister is
The minister is Vidura.
Okay.
Vidura is Dhritarashtra's prime minister.
Oh.
So he's his chief advisor. He's his chief of staff. Just like, I don't know if you watched The West Wing, or, other like White House movies or shows. The chief of staff, he doesn't even have to check in with the secretary. He just walks in on President Bartlett. Leo McGarry just walks in on President Bartlett and gives him what for something that went wrong, right? He's the most confidential. He's like the person who's the most confidential advisor to the chief of state. So here, that's King Dhritarashtra, and his brother Vidura is his chief minister, and Dhritarashtra's eldest son, Duryodhana, didn't like the advice that Vidura was giving him, so he called him all sorts of ill names. And so Vidura, being a saintly person, thought, oh, this is my cue, exit, stage left.
Perfect.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you for giving us the opportunity. to
Well,
talk
just
about
kind of trying to tie all the things together, the pictures and the names and the titles and this and that and what for, you know?
it. And this is just one little corner, one little piece of the puzzle that is Mahabharata. These things are referred to in a couple of places as very mysterious.
All Harvey, page 2,
Now you have,
the rest of the story.
thank you, Grantha Raja Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.